Ukrainian President Zelenskyy is calling for help from allies after a Russian attack in Kyiv killed 17 people and wounded dozens of others. The Ukrainian Air Force said they shot down nearly 100 drones, but they didn't intercept any of the 28 missiles that were fired. Now President Zelenskyy is stressing the country's partners need to send them more anti-ballistic systems. ABC foreign correspondent Tom Soufi-Burge is here with the latest. Tom, this is a direct call to action by Zelenskyy, is it not?
Yeah, that's right, Andrew. I mean, I think President Zelenskyy has come out very clearly, and he has said that in 2026, throughout the whole of this year so far, Ukraine has received a much smaller number of the interceptor missiles for air defense systems to shoot down Russian ballistic missiles. He says that in 2026 compared to 2025, there are threefold less of those interceptors coming from Western partners. Now, obviously, the Patriot system made in the United States is the key one. President Zelenskyy meeting President Trump just days ago at the White House and clearly pushing once again for the US to supply more of those Patriot missiles. But of course, we know the US has used up a lot of them in its war against Iran. But look, this attack by Russia on Kyiv and the surrounding region overnight was also critical, not only because Ukraine wasn't able to shoot down a single one of 24 ballistic missiles fired by Russia, but also 4 anti-ship missiles, but also because the Russians now, according to Ukrainian officials, have been striking commercial companies in Ukraine and their logistics warehouses, major supermarkets, the public post office, and also a massive e-commerce company in Ukraine. And this appears to be a direct Russian response to basically in the last few weeks a spate of Ukrainian long-range drone attacks on a company in Russia called Wildberries. It is the biggest e-commerce company in Russia. It is absolutely vast, and the Ukrainians have been repeatedly using these drones to strike these logistics centers linked to that e-commerce Russian company. And basically, Ukraine has accused the Russians of using that company to distribute military equipment. You can buy non-lethal military equipment like body armor or night vision goggles on Wildberries' website. But Wildberries, the company, says, well, that is the case for many, many other companies around the world. Look, basically what the Ukrainians are doing are trying to take the war into Russia. And what is clear right now, Andrew, is we're seeing the war escalating on multiple levels, particularly in terms of these aerial attacks by Ukraine, these drone attacks against that company and Russian oil refineries, and now this Russian response.
A major escalation. Tom Soufi-Burge, thank you. ABC News contributor and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, Mick Mulroy, is here for more. Mick, President Zelenskyy isn't mincing words. He says ballistic missile interceptions could have saved lives today. How quickly could the U.S. or European allies give them that type of equipment?
So, Andrew, it's important to point out the Russians are specifically targeting and killing civilians. So every one of these is a war crime. Countries that have these missiles could contribute this as a humanitarian effort, right? So it doesn't necessarily make you a partisan in the war to simply give the Ukrainians the ability to defend innocent civilians. So that needs to be taken into consideration, and the Europeans that have these need to move quickly. As far as the U.S., we all know that there is significant shortages of the defensive interceptors because of the war in Iran. That's a bigger issue that really needs to be addressed by the United States. Right now, we're currently in a regional air war with a mediocre military, and we're seeing this level of issues. So if this was a war between, say, the United States and China that included ground forces, this would be a massive problem. So this needs to be addressed for the U.S. and, of course, also for our partners and allies that do rely on these systems to defend themselves, to include the Ukrainians.
Meanwhile, Ukraine struck another Wildberries warehouse. The company is one of Russia's largest retailers. According to Ukrainian count, 14 of Wildberry warehouses have caught fire in the last 3 weeks. Why is this so significant to Russia?
Because it also operates basically as a logistical supply for their military operations in Ukraine. So families can purchase things from this to send to the troops on the front line that are generally not available to the troops writ large, because Russia, of course, is having an economic crunch and, quite frankly, doesn't support its troops the way most militaries would. So this has become an alternative military logistics supply point, which, of course, makes it a valid military target.
So do you think today's attack by Russia is a statement after Ukraine's drone attacks have seen some success here?
So, Andrew, it's definitely true that the Ukrainians have shifted the tide of this war. Russia can see that. They can see that it's not only not gaining the territory it expected, but the Ukrainians are getting better every day at deep strikes inside Russia at facilities they didn't have access to before. And every month they go up in their capacity to build these low cost, very lethal drones. So the longer this goes on, the more difficult it's going to be for Russia to maintain any foothold.
Mick Mulroy, thank you.